The New York Mets are losing starting pitching options left and right through free agency. Where will they turn next? I'll break it all down on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X, Finkelstein Ryan. Also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers getting $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, first off, I want to wish you all a happy new year. I decided to come on and do one final show for 2023, partly because I have a big announcement for the final segment, but also because a lot's happened over the weekend. A lot of movement in the starting pitching market, and none of it going towards the New York Mets. The big news is that Lucas Giolito will not be a Met. They had rumored interest in him earlier in the week, but he has instead chosen to sign with the Boston Red Sox on a 2-year, $38.5 million deal. And this is a contract that I would have loved if the Mets signed him. It's a essentially 1-year pillow contract with an option. So it's $18 million in 2024. Then there is essentially a player option for 2025. He can opt out of the contract and just take his $18 million plus $1 million buyout. So it's basically a 1-year, $19 million deal if he pitches well. If he didn't pitch well, well, there's the risk. Then you'd have to have Giolito on your books for $19 million in 2025. And then there's a conditional third option. Essentially, if he pitches fewer than 140 innings, it becomes a club option at $14 million for 2026. If he pitches at least 140 innings, and this is in 2025, then it becomes a $19 million mutual option, where he could have opted out of that and got a $1.5 million buyout. That's how you ultimately get to that $30.5 million number, because it's $18 million guaranteed for 2024. That $19 million is guaranteed for 2025 if he wants it, as would be that buyout that would come his way as well. So that's how you get to $30.5 million. Who knows? Maybe the Red Sox are more creative in the structure. We don't know what the Mets offer was. Maybe the Mets didn't have a conditional third-year option. Maybe they just had a straight 3-year deal. We don't know the details of the contract, but ultimately Giolito chooses to sign with the Red Sox. And without Giolito, you're getting to the point where that tier B, or I don't know, is it tier C? I don't really know how to quantify Giolito, but he's one of the few options that was left that you could at least dream of like a 3-starter, right? Like that's sort of the last one of those guys that's out there. I'll talk about a few more of them in the final segment. Mike Clevenger, Michael Lorenzen, Hyunjin Ryu. We'll get to some of the names, but they really aren't inspiring. They aren't guys that you could still think about and say, oh, this could go really well. Giolito, at least he had the first half of the season last year where he had a 3.79 ERA. He's young enough. His stuff is good enough where you could hope for something. Now, granted, there is risk in that contract. Don't get me wrong. The idea of having to pay Giolito if he had a horrible year, $19 million in 2025, that would not have been great for the Mets. And who knows? Maybe they just offered him a straight 1-year deal. Now, again, we don't know what the exact contract was, but it's not something to cry about or cry over, right, to lose out on Giolito, but yet it still felt like a gut punch because of how this offseason goes. And then you follow that up with the other free agent news this weekend. Frankie Montas signs with the Reds. And yes, I have tossed out the idea of a Montas to the Mets throughout this offseason on a couple of occasions. Haven't gone in depth on it because it's not a signing I would have been thrilled about, but a guy that, had some good years in the past with the Oakland Athletics. He got traded to the Yankees a couple of years ago. I think it was the 2022 deadline. Didn't pitch well in 8 starts. Then he ends up having a shoulder injury that basically cut them out all of last year. and now he's trying to bounce back. I will note that we did an article about him at justbaseball.com, and the home road splits when he was with the A's are pretty alarming. When he was pitching in that massive ballpark in the Coliseum, he had a 3.28 ERA. On the road, it was a 4.50 ERA. So again, I'm not going to be upset that the Mets didn't get Montas. I don't even know if they had a lot of interest there. But what's more of note to me is the fact that this dude got $16 million on a 1-year deal to sign with the Reds. Now, part of that is because who wants to go pitch in that bandbox in Cincinnati? But the other part of it is this market is insane. And with that, you just get to the point where you have to wonder how much are the Mets going to have to overpay to get a starter to come in, and who is that starter? And what value can they bring? Again, if they got Giolito even on that contract, 2025 would have scared me, but I could have talked myself into, look, this guy's going to go out. He's going to have a really solid 2024, and he's going to want to get a multi-year deal off of it, and he'll opt out of the deal. And it's basically, 1 year, $19 million. If it was 1 year, $20 million, I could have got my head around it, and I would have been excited about it because I could have said, all right, you're going to have Senga, you're going to have, Giolito, Quintana, Severino, Hauser. It's not great, but it's a rotation you can at least say is somewhat respectable going into the year. And you can, again, kind of talk yourself into, all right, a team that maybe hangs around 500 at the bullpen ends up being better than expected. If some of the young players, take a big leap, hey, the Mets are in the mix. They're like one of these teams from last season, the Marlins, the Diamondbacks, the Reds that hung around for a while, and they could have, a fun year at least. But you lose out on Giolito, and then the options start to dwindle. And it gets to a point where I really don't know where the Mets go, because, you could get creative and find another trade. And that's something we'll discuss a little bit in the next segment, because the Braves swung a big trade yesterday as well. So that's something that the Mets could theoretically do. I just don't know who the name is. Then there's the two main guys in free agency I think the Mets should be interested in, but we don't know if they are, because all the reports are sort of indicating that the Mets are hesitant to shop in that top of the starting pitching market. And I don't think they're going to get Blake Snell. And I don't even know if they should get Blake Snell because of the draft pick compensation that's tied to him, how much money he's going to want to make, and also the fact that it feels like Snell sort of belongs on the West Coast. That's where he probably wants to go. And with teams like the Giants and the Angels and others that are still out there, he probably can get his wish. But you still have Jordan Montgomery and Shota Imanaga, who are in this free agent class, who are obviously going to get paid top dollar, but could be number 2 starters for you. And we just don't know if the Mets have interest. So what I want to talk about next is, why not? Should they? Is there like a smoke screen up right now? And maybe the Mets really are in on these guys, and that's why there's maybe a little bit of that lack of clarity on what their vision is right now. And if not them, could they swing a deal like the one the Braves just made? So I'm going to go through all those different options in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. Today is Sunday, so if there's a matchup that you just love, throw that $5 moneyline bet down, and again, you could win big long term. Get all those bonus bets. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. We got bowl season in college football. The college football playoffs are now upon us. Got the NFL season winding down, and the NBA action is there for you every night. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including the spread, player props, where, if you're watching an NBA game, you can bet on a player's points, rebounds, assists, 3-pointers made. If you're watching an NFL game, you can bet on the first player to score a touchdown in a given game. There's also over-unders and more. And remember, again, you place that $5 money line bet. If you win it, $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get in on the action. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. For all of you everyday listeners who might want a little bit of extra coverage for the show, make sure you consider becoming a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where I can send you updates anytime something breaks on the Mets, anytime I might have a hot take I want to share, or if you have a question, you can reach out to me at any time as well. Again, it's a texting service. It goes both ways. I appreciate all of you who subscribe. You can find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, let's look at this starting pitching market. And when you try to look at the top names, already mentioned Blake Snell, Imanaga, Montgomery, that's pretty much where we're at. That's the last of the top tier starters the Mets could add where you'd feel really good about their rotation. If they got any of those three lefties, all right, they're cooking with gas. If they don't, there's not a lot of other options. I mean, Marcus Stroman is sort of the best of the tier B of this market, and I don't think he's coming back to the Mets. They have to overpay, and even then, they'd really have to mend fences. I don't think the Mets want Stroman back. I don't think Stroman wants to come back to the Mets, even though if you just remove all of the other stuff and just look at like the stat sheet in a vacuum, it's exactly what they need. To have a guy that could come in who could pitch to a 3.5 ERA and give you 140 to 160 innings. Like, that's what you want, but that's not on the table, I don't think. So, again, you look at the two options that seem to be staring the Mets in the face. We just don't know if they're looking back at them. It's Shota Imanaga and it's Jordan Montgomery. Now, Imanaga was not going to come over until after the new year, so now he's going to come over. He's going to meet teams. We don't know if the Mets are one of those teams. We don't know how in they are on this guy. I think they should be all in. I don't understand how you could have been $325 million in on Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and then you're not going to even meet Imanaga, a guy who led the NPB in strikeouts, who has a profile when it just comes to pedigree and age that's similar to Kodai Senga. Now, this market may overpay him drastically, and that might be the holdup. If this guy suddenly pushes past $20 million a year to 22, 23, 24 million, I understand the risk that's there. You have to pay a posting fee as well. Who knows? Maybe Imanaga gets a 6 or a 7 year deal. I don't think so. But again, this market is crazy. Frankie Montas just got $16 million. So it's one of those things where we'll judge it when the contract comes in. Same thing comes with Jordan Montgomery. But I broke down Montgomery on a show at the end of last week as well, where it's just like you're looking at the options and you start to think about it and you think about the money that's being given out anyway. And you wonder, like, why aren't the Mets in on this guy, even if he comes in a little more than you would have expected, even if you have sort of a value calculator on what you believe Jordan Montgomery is worth and he is going to get paid well more than that? You're the Mets. You're Steve Cohen. You have the money. Go get a guy so that you can not only win this year, but a guy that's going to give you quality innings for years to come. I think the one thing that could be happening here is it's just a market thing when it comes to David Stearns. Now, there was a year in free agency where like the cap sort of ballooned when it comes to the NBA, where you saw guys like Bismack Biyombo and Timofey Mozgov. And I apologize if you're not a basketball fan, but bear with me. It's similar to Montas getting the money he just got. It was a time where the market just ended up dictating that some guys had to get paid because the floor of the NBA rise and there was so much money that had to be given out that these guys just got massive contracts. And you look at that, free agency period, and almost every deal that was given out turned out horribly. Maybe that's this year's class. And maybe all of these contracts are just bad. And the Mets have really analyzed this market and they just don't think it's worth it. And maybe all of a sudden they're talking themselves into guys like the ones I spoke about on Friday's show, Christian Scott, Mike Vassell. They're all right, these might actually be rotation options. And hey, we like Jose Budo. We like Joey Lucchesi. And honestly, Joey Lucchesi, if you had to just in a vacuum say you get Joey Lucchesi or Sean Manaea, while Manaea is definitely better, is he $20 million better? Is he $18 million better? Like if Montas gets 16, what's Manaea getting? I really don't know. So it could come down to a point, and it's not necessarily the Mets being cheap. It's the fact that, you're looking at a season where your chances of winning the World Series are slim. I mean, what are the odds that the Mets are going to go toe-to-toe with the Braves this year? We'll actually use that as a transition point because the Braves just made a trade. They got Chris Sale to bolster their rotation. And this is a deal the Mets could have been in on conceivably, right? It's sort of a salary dump in some respects for the Red Sox. They shaved $10.5 million. That's all the Braves are going to pay them, but they send $17 million in this deal. And they also, get out of a club option, but I think there is that club option might vest if Sale hits a certain amount of innings pitched. But regardless, really what this comes down to is the Braves called the Red Sox about Sale, and the Red Sox were able to get their starting second baseman potentially for the next 6 years in Vaughn Grisham in the deal. That's really what it's about. They do cut some salary. They replace Sale with Giolito, which isn't necessarily a lateral move because Chris Sale, when he's on the mound, is better than Lucas Giolito. At the same time, him on the mound is not something we've seen a lot of over the last couple of years. Giolito is the opposite of that. So they get dependable innings. They trade their oft-injured ace. They get Vaughn Grisham. I think it's a great trade for the Red Sox. For the Braves, it's a bet on Sale's upside when it comes to October. Like, they can manage his innings. They have Max Fried, Spencer Strider atop their rotation. They still have Charlie Morton, who's always going to give you innings. They have Bryce Elder, who gave them innings last year. They have AJ Smith, was a Shawver, the top prospect that came up last year. I probably pronounced his last name wrong. Apologies there. And, they have like Ronaldo Lopez, who they're stretching out. Not that he's going to be in the rotation now, I don't think, but it gives them another insurance plan. So for the Braves, what they did here is they said, all right, if we can get to October and Chris Sale's healthy and starting game 3 for us, we feel great about it. And that's where they're at. And it gives them that depth in October. It's worth the risk for them. And hey, if everything breaks right and Chris Sale can find a little bit of a fountain of youth and he can stay healthy, he could be, top level performer again. He struck out nearly 30% of the batters he faced last year, and he might be great for them. And then there's a club option that they can exercise or that might vest. And all of a sudden, hey, it really worked out for them. But they had a guy in Vaughn Grisham that was expendable. The Mets didn't have that guy, and they don't have the incentive to try to win now to make that type of a trade. That's the same reason why they're not in on Corbin Burns or Shane Bieber, because it's a 1-year deal. It's trying to fit into this particular window. And that's why I think Imanaga or Montgomery would be such a good ad. And maybe the Mets just aren't putting out reported interest because they don't want to get burned again. Maybe they don't want to be all the way out there saying, all right, we're full force on Imanaga. We're actually going to be in on Montgomery, but maybe they have dipped their toes in the water. And maybe they are the team that surprised us and signs one of those two guys. Otherwise, though, if they don't get one of those two guys in free agency and David Stearns can't pull another rabbit out of the hat when it comes to a trade, and I'll talk a little bit in the next segment about Hauser. I do think that was a rabbit out of the hat, and I think Mets fans are really underrating that trade. Well, then their options are very limited in free agency, and that's what I want to get to next. What the other options are, what the most likely outcome is now based on missing out on Giolito, the fact that they might not get those top guys in free agency. So I'll go through what is left in the next segment. First, though, another word from our sponsors. So let's look at the remaining free agent options if the Mets don't sign Imanaga or Montgomery. I think the best bet is probably Mike Clevinger. He had a 3.77 ERA last year with the White Sox, a 4.33 ERA with the Padres in 2022. He's now 2 years removed from Tommy John surgery. Got some innings under his belt last year, so that's all positive developments. I will note that there is some questions about who this guy is as far as the off-the-field stuff, what he'd bring into your clubhouse. He's a little bit of a bad reputation. In 2020, he got in trouble with Zach Plesac for breaking the COVID restrictions, that they went to some party with friends, and then they got a lot of trouble for it. Then he was under investigation for a domestic violence case, although Major League Baseball did not suspend him for it. So, I guess believe what we can on all of that. When it comes to just pitching, though, he's the best arm that the Mets could get. His pitches graded out really well last year. None of them got hit very hard. When it comes to pitching run value, he was among the best, 75% of the league. His pitching run value was 12 overall. He had good grades on his fastball, his off speed, his breaking stuff. So, he is an option that could eat innings, that could fill the middle of your rotation. He's not going to be a guy that you're going to love starting a playoff game, but the Mets need to just get through this year, honestly. And he's a guy that could do that. So if they sign Mike Clevinger and that ended up being the result of the whole offseason, great. Not great, geez. Good result. Not amazing, but considering the market, if they sign to a 1-year deal, now the cost of that could be astronomical. It might be $20 million. I don't know. But it would be worth it if it's a 1-year deal. He's not on your books long-term. He's just stopgap filler for you. And look, that's why the Adrian Hauser deal is really good. Okay. Because the Mets got a guy who's only going to cost you, $5.4 million, I think is what the projected arbitration number is. But a guy that is right in line with a lot of these guys that are probably in the market for right now. And, they got him $10 million cheaper. And, it was just a solid ad to jump on. With free agents, you got to compete with all these other teams. Okay. When you're making a trade, you're talking to that one team. And the Mets were able to get a guy that fills the need. And if he's your 5 starter, I think you're in good shape. Now, the problem is if you don't have another guy, if you're looking at your current rotation and Severino's got to be your 3, you got issues. If Severino's your 4 and he's high upside and you have Hauser and McGill sort of competing for that 5th spot, you have David Peterson coming in the second half. You have pitching prospects that might break through this year. You have Jose Budo and Joey Lucchesi, who honestly, I'd almost prefer, and I'm sure the Mets probably would, those guys that, for Budo, he's still making the minimum. For Lucchesi, it's like $1 million and change, I think. You compare that to like Sean Manaea, like how much better is Sean Manaea than Joey Lucchesi? Yes, he has more major league innings under his belt. I get it. He's at driver line right now. Maybe he makes a massive jump. I wouldn't be mad at them at signing Sean Manaea, but I got to imagine that part of their calculation is looking at that exactly and saying, is it really worth it to give Manaea, again, if Montas got 16, 17, $18 million, or he probably wants a multi-year deal. Do they want to really, have a bloated salary on their books in 2025? And I think that's really part of the problem here. But looking at the other options, you have Michael Lorenzen. He's coming off a decent year. His fastball does grade out well. He throws pretty hard. Problem is, he threw way too many pitches last year. He had 7 different offerings. Now, primarily fastball, slider, changeup, which all graded out well. But he also had a sinker he threw 12% of the time that got rocked. So if you could get rid of the sinker, I think that would help. He also had a sweeper, a changeup, and a curveball and a cutter that he mixed in. None of those pitches graded well. None of them were thrown more than 6% of the time. If you could refine his arsenal down, make him fastball, slider, changeup, work on those pitches, maybe he would have a little more success. But also, I look at a guy that, overall, sure, he pitched over 150 innings, had a 4.18 ERA, but a lot of that came in Detroit, and that is a cavernous ballpark. He ends up in Philly, which is a bandbox, and his numbers ballooned, particularly the home run numbers. He pitched to a 5.51 ERA, and he had a no-hitter mixed in there. So that just shows you how bad he was in the other outings. I would not love a Michael Lorenzen ad. I really wouldn't. I'd prefer Mike Clevinger. But I also just want the Mets to add viable starting pitching. So in some respects, I'd be okay with any of them. Other options, I mentioned Manaea. You have Alex Wood. You have Corey Kluber, James Paxton, Noah Syndergaard, Zach Davies, Vince Velasquez. Not a lot of good options. I think the other one that I would actually be a little bit excited about is Hyunjin Ryu. He had a 3.46 ERA and 11 starts coming off Tommy John last year. This will be his age 37 season, but he has a career 3.27 ERA. He has been very good when healthy in the big leagues. I think he would be a nice option. It would be 2 lefties in your rotation with Ryu and Quintana, but I would be cool with that. I think the Mets, could maybe get the most out of those guys, and there is a path where you're a good ball club with that rotation. Certainly not great, though. And that's why I'm still holding out hope that the Mets could still get a big signing that could still pull off Imanaga or Montgomery, or maybe there's a trade that we don't foresee. Otherwise, you got to sort of come to terms with the fact that this is, really a bridge year. And 2025 is where the Mets are actually trying to contend. And this is a year where they're going to put their best foot forward, try to round out their roster. And I still think they do in some respects. There's, rover and interest in JD Martinez and Justin Turner. And we'll see what else they do. But there's not a high probability that it's going to be a playoff team in 2024, at least where things currently stand. Anyway, that'll be all for today's show. But I mentioned earlier that I had a big announcement for the final segment. I want to tell you all that we have reached over 1 million views on YouTube in 2023. First time that I have hit over 1 million on this show in a year when it comes to YouTube views. Last year we did it on the audio side. I do appreciate the audio audience as well. We hit over 1 million on the audio side last month. I wasn't sure. I kind of had an idea that we'd cleared 2 million on the two combined, but I saw coming into November, December that there was a shot that the YouTube audience would clear 1 million views on the year. It was not the free agent push that I thought that would get us there, but I appreciate all of you that tuned in and still made it happen. This has been a really difficult last month for me. I had the flu. I had to get my wisdom teeth pulled because all of a sudden, something I've been putting off for a while, their pain came up and I just had to do it. And I was wondering if I was going to get there. And so it's just really gratifying to hit that number. There's something about getting to 1 million that just feels very rewarding at the end of what was a really crazy year. And I really do wish all of you a happy new year. I know for me, I'm looking forward to turning the page to 2024. 2023 brought me many blessings. I got married this year. I guess I moved a little in 2022, but me and the wife moved in together this year in our new place and everything else. And a lot of good things happened in my personal life, but there was also a lot of struggle. And obviously with the Mets, it was not as simple and joyous as 2022 was. Obviously the end of the 2022 season was a little bit rough, but if you look back at that year and the 101 wins, it was just like this magic ride that we were all on, and it felt like the franchise was in this great place. And then this year, you sort of got smacked in the face into the reality of still being a Mets fan. But I'm optimistic. That's just generally how I look at life. I think 2024 is going to be a good year for the Mets. I don't necessarily think they're going to win the World Series, but I think there's going to be a lot of positive developments. I still really trust David Stearns running the show. Anybody who is against Steve Cohen at this point, I think is kind of ungrateful. The guy has been investing a lot in this team, and I think the Mets are going to get there eventually. I think Stearns is the right guy they finally got in place to combine resources with a smart baseball mind to get to where this franchise wants to go, that there's going to be a lot of positive player development stories this year that we're all going to be able to watch. And I just appreciate all of you who continue to choose Locked On Mets for your coverage of this team. I love what I do. I appreciate the Locked On Podcast Network for keeping me in this seat. And I can't wait for another year of Mets baseball. So again, Happy New Year's to you all. As always, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, that information is in the episode description. Now you made it to the end of the show. Check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube covering everything in the world of sports. And that's Locked On Sports Today with our local experts on each team and our league-wide experts on each league. You can find Locked On Sports Today streaming on YouTube 24/7.